Hello, this is Lenny from Indivisible Illinois, and it is Thursday. We are going to live stream here every week from now until the elections in November. The theme of our Thursday live streams will always be about virus-free voting in Illinois. Thank you for being here. We're very excited to have special guests here today, including Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx, and also Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois. I'm here with my co-state coordinator from Indivisible Illinois, Scott Cross. I'm very happy to have you here, Scott. This is the first time you're here, and we would just love to hear from you. Scott.
Thanks, Lenny. Really great to be here. Welcome everyone to Indivisible. If you're out there tonight and it's one of your first times maybe tuning in to Indivisible, we welcome you to take this journey with us these uncertain times. I got into activism because I believe that everyone deserved the right to get married back in the day. And we hope that, in these days, as we're fighting police brutality and we're showing our support for our allies at Black Lives Matter, and we're under this pandemic with COVID, that you will help us to further the idea of virus-free voting. And we just welcome you to the Indivisible movement tonight. With that, back to you, Lenny.
Thanks, Scott. We would love to hear first a few opening statements from Kim Foxx and Senator Durbin, and then we'll have a few questions after that. First, we're going to hear from Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx.
Thank you, Lenny, and thank you all for having me on your Thursday meeting. It's an honor to be with you. The last time that I had the pleasure of sitting and talking to Lenny and Rose on the Indivisible podcast was back on March 7th, which feels like 17 years ago, but it was literally only 4 months ago, and before our world as we knew it changed so dramatically. The last 3.5 months have been, as I think it's been said a million times, unprecedented as we face challenges globally related to the COVID-19 crisis, and locally, the impact that the crisis has had on all aspects of our government. As a Cook County State's Attorney, as you all know, I preside over the second largest prosecutor's office in the country. We have the largest single site jail in the country. And back in April, it was the biggest COVID hotspot in the country for a period of time. So the course of the last several months have been adjusting to dealing with the pandemic and the policy aspects or impacts of our decisions related to our criminal justice system. How were we managing the public safety of our city and county with the public health crisis of COVID? The great thing about this moment of opportunity was that over the last several years, we've been working on bond reform here in Cook County with all of our criminal justice stakeholder partners, the chief judge, the public defender, the sheriff, myself. Back in 2013, the Cook County jail population was around 10,500 people. We had been under a federal consent decree for almost 4 decades because of overcrowding. Over the course of the last 5-6 years, we've been able to reduce that jail population to about 5,600, which was the lowest it had been in decades. So when COVID-19 hit in March, we were starting with a jail population that had been dramatically reduced because of the efforts on bail reform. And between March and mid-May, we were able to get that jail population down to the lowest it had been since early 1980 to 4,025. And so we saw 1,600 people that were no longer coming into our facilities due to the crisis, so that we can do things like, as much as you can, do single celling or social distancing in the jail. But the reality is, in having done that, in shedding those 1,600 people, about 25% of the population, we then started to ask the questions, well, if those people safely didn't need to be there in the first place, why were they there? And so this is the opportunity for us as the State's Attorney's Office and with our stakeholders to figure out is the path moving forward. How do we make sure that we're using incarceration for the sole purpose of public safety and not for what we were doing before, just kind of the de facto place we do for folks who are poor or have mental health issues. Because what the crisis with COVID has exposed is the overwhelming disparities related to healthcare. And those same disparities, the neighborhoods that have been most impacted by the crisis here in Cook County, overwhelmingly African American and Latino, are the same neighborhoods that are disproportionately impacted by our criminal justice system. They're the same neighborhoods, sadly, that are disproportionately impacted by violence. This awful weekend that we had last week in Chicago, if you did a heat map of where COVID-19 also disproportionately impacted, same neighborhoods that we've seen the violence. So this is telling us something big, that all of these things are interrelated. The intersection between healthcare and access in our criminal justice system. The number of people who've lost their jobs over the course of the last several months, also disproportionately impacted in those neighborhoods. So as we emerge from this, looking at ways that we address healthcare, economics, and our justice system, they're all together. And we have to be as intentional about getting beyond this point and not returning to some of the failed policies of the past, because we must. And I will end with this. As you said, I talked about the virus, but there is obviously another insidious virus that we've been spending a lot of time talking about in the last several weeks, which is racism and systemic racism, and how it has infiltrated all aspects of our systems and government for centuries. One of the things that I'm really optimistic about is, as I lay out the issues that we've been dealing with related to COVID, they're the same issues related to structural and systemic racism, is that we have leaders like Senator Durbin who are advocating on the federal level for changes in policing policy, changes in accountability, that we're talking about these intersections, whether it relates to DACA and the xenophobia that's coming out of the White House. All of these things intersect. And I know the instinct, and I'm a lawyer and I'm a prosecutor, is to just talk about criminal justice. We can't separate criminal justice conversations from racism conversations, from these broader issues. And that in the interest of ensuring that we don't continue to see people in our streets fighting over the same issues around police accountability in the name of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor and the like, we have to take this moment now and have the reckoning that is long overdue, and be bold and fearless and relentless in our march to November. If there was ever a time to be fired up to make sure that we have that access to the ballot, that everyone who is able to vote votes, it's now. There's never been a more important election in my lifetime, where all of these things have come together in this moment to tell us that we cannot be complacent, that we have to be as dedicated as ever to make sure that democracy and all that it stands for is protected in this November election. So I'm grateful to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. We are going to pass it to Senator Dick Durbin for some opening statements.
I hope you can hear me. Can
Yes.
you? Good.
Yes.
Everything's working. I think this is the first time I've actually seen Kim Foxx since the primary. It wasn't long after that primary that we all decided to shelter in place. Congratulations, Kim. And I'm glad I supported you. You've really done a remarkable job as state's attorney. We need you now more than ever. So keep up your good work, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you on important issues. As we are speaking, the House of Representatives in Washington is probably at this moment voting on this justice and policing bill, which was introduced both in the House and the Senate. I'm a co-sponsor of the Senate version. The lead sponsors are Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. It has many features to it. I won't go into it unless you wish, a question period. But we had a bump in the road in the Senate yesterday when the procedural vote, which Senator McConnell was looking for another version of the bill, was stopped by Democrats with the assurance that we want to work on this together in a bipartisan way. And we believe that the base bill should be the one that's about to pass the House of Representatives tonight. I'm sure each of you feel as I do. The reaction across the United States, in our state, and across the United States, and across the world to the murder of George Floyd has been nothing short of remarkable. It was such a historic turning event in history when it came to the issue of racism. As every historian knows, we've had slavery brought to our shores over 400 years ago, and what fueled it was greed and racism. Well, slavery may be officially gone, but when it comes to greed and racism, they are still there, and we are paying the price for them even to this day. We've got to do something about it. The thing that I've found interesting is I've talked to the people in the streets all over the state, in tiny little Jerseyville, Illinois, which may not even have African-American occupants and residents, to Springfield, to Chicago in many meetings. And there is a sense of determination to do something. And the younger people in particular, black, white, and brown, young women as leaders, as much if not more than men, are saying, listen, you grown up, we don't want to grow up in the shadow of racism. We don't want our kids to either. So do something, make some changes. And I think we have to. I'm not sure that Senator McConnell believes that at this point, but I hope we can convince him. Let me say a word about the coronavirus, then a word about voting, and open it to your questions. There haven't been any dramatic changes in the coronavirus, but for lessons learned. Many of these governors, mayors, and others who were pleading to reopen the economy early, marching in the streets, going with guns to the state capitol in Michigan, on and on and on. They persuaded some governors to do what Governor Pritzker did not do, and that is to give in early. And now we see what's happening. In many of the biggest states in our nation, they are seeing an increase in the rate of infection in ways that they never dreamed of. Texas is a classic example. Texas is going into an emergency situation that few states have faced because they decided to ignore the real dangers. Now, what are we doing in Washington? We're doing something, but we're not doing enough. We need to move forward with another relief package. We had an earlier relief package, which helped small businesses. It helped people who were unemployed, sent some money to local governments, but not to the smaller ones, provided money for hospitals and the like, things that were good. But by and large, these are all expiring. The unemployment benefits at the federal level that we put in because of COVID-19, those unemployment benefits expire on July 31st. We have 40 million Americans that are unemployed at this point. We have millions who are counting on these $600 a week checks to keep their families together. I don't know of anybody who thinks July 31st it's all going to be over. We still have to fight this battle throughout this year and perhaps beyond that. I hope not, but it's quite likely. The last point I want to make is the state of the economy and the voting situation, all kind of wrapped up in one. I think people are reluctant to open the economy even when the politicians announce it's time. We're going to start this weekend and see who shows up at a lot of places to shop and eat out in the city of Chicago, for example. What I found in many communities when they've opened up, people have been reluctant. They still lack the confidence that it's safe to go out. And maybe they're right to some extent. They certainly should hold back if they're personally concerned. I believe they should. But if we're going to do this, we have to make it available, not only the services of the economy, but the most important services, the service of our democracy. And that goes to our election on November 3rd. The General Assembly met for only a few days, but they did some significant things. And I think you're all aware of them, but they bear repeating at least for a moment here. They made our election day a state holiday. They made all schools available as polling places. They permitted curbside voting, drop-off locations for mail ballots. And they expanded early voting hours significantly. And they also are sending out notices to people who voted in the last election. And anyone who ever asked for an early ballot, they're sending out notices that they can make application again. It's an expensive undertaking. Some federal money has come back to the state, $14 million in our CARES bill that we passed, but it's not nearly enough. I'd like to put more in it, but I'll be honest with you. I don't think the Trump administration is going to give us any more money to help facilitate voting. They don't want to see that happen. They argue that paper ballots are fraudulent. Well, tell that to Oregon, which has been using mail-in ballots now for many, many election cycles. Tell it to Utah, Hawaii. I mean, the list goes on and on. where they've used these and done it without evidence of any substantial fraud. It says to me that people are going to respect the process. We have to follow the rules. We have to apply the laws, but we've got to do everything we can to encourage people to vote on November 3rd.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. We have Rose Colasino, who's on the line here, which we met with you with Rose earlier in the year, and I would love to have her on to ask a question now.
Hello, Senator Durbin, and hello, Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx. Thank you both for your remarks. It's a pleasure to be in the same virtual room as both of you and everybody else on the call. I will just take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Rose Colasino. I'm the election security person for Indivisible Illinois, and started out with Indivisible in 2016, election security since 2018, and been quite busy with machine hacking and hand-marked paper ballots and audits. And then lo and behold, as you both have alluded to, the pandemic hit and all of our plans went haywire. And so we actually, Senator Durbin, we have a team, a vote by mail task force. We were working on the legislation with Senator Julie Morrison and a group of other people, and we're pleased that the law was signed by Governor Pritzker, and now we are working with election authorities to implement. We've made strides with the Chicago board and working on relationships with all the other election authorities, whomever will speak with us. So my question, we have been working quite a bit on the local level, but we understand how critical it is to at least attempt to get some federal funding. I appreciate your remarks. And I do recall, though, our reason for meeting with you, we had a rally back in September, and there were about 28 rallies across the country. We were able to secure $250 million from Speaker McConnell. So it's not impossible. I know $250 million is a little different than the $3.6 billion that we're requesting from the HEROES Act. And I have two questions. I'll just ask them at the same time. Is there any possible way we can be creative? We can, I think, fairly assume that yourself and Senator Duckworth are behind the HEROES Act. There's been conversations. We've been in our share of Zoom calls about the HEROES Act and other aspects of election security, and perhaps we should target some of your colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, some of the Republicans on that committee. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. We have a bunch of social media toolkits. If I have time at the very end of this meeting, I'm going to present that to everybody that's listening. I'd like to ask you if you think that makes sense, if there are other creative ways that we should be getting involved with. And then the last question is I came across this very well written letter by Senator Feinstein. You signed off on it too. And talking about creativity, it was written to the president of the National Association of State Election Directors, I believe, my bad handwriting, and also the National Associations of Secretary of State. It just seems these days we have to be creative. This upcoming election is going to be the election of our lifetime. It's going to be epic. So what can we do as a group of really energized, wanting to help activists? How can we help the HEROES Act, or what other ways can we help perhaps get some kind of funding? As you very well know, Illinois needs so much to make things happen in November.
So I'll try to answer succinctly and briefly. Here's what it comes down to. I think there's going to be a push on for another COVID-19 relief bill. I believe that it's going to come primarily from Donald Trump. He is falling behind in the polls. He wants to do something. He wants to send out $1,200 checks to people again and sign each check personally, or say that he did, so that he can make some impression on the voters. He certainly doesn't want to see unemployment benefits in July 31st for millions of Americans. That is not what a president does when he's hoping to build a plurality in the vote or to win an election. So I think that he'll be pushing for that, and the time frame on that is interesting. We will be in one more week, and then on July 2nd, we will take a 2-week recess, coming back middle of July, July 16th. Then we have, I think, 3 weeks, only 3 weeks that we're in session. until we break for the August recess and don't return until September. So if there's anything that's going to happen by way of additional relief to businesses or unemployed people, or even money coming back to the states and localities, or election money, we're going to know very soon, in just a matter of a few weeks. Otherwise, frankly, the money won't be there when it should be there. I'm still skeptical that the Republicans will sign up for any additional money to help out in elections. Their basic premise is suppress the vote, reduce the vote. Our premise is the opposite. Expand the vote. Everyone who's legally eligible should have an easy time of it if they want to vote, not a hardship if they want to vote. So I think the mail-in ballots are a way to bridge this COVID virus concern. It's expensive. The postage is probably $1.50 for every voter who gets the original notice and then gets the ballots sent to them and so forth. But I am skeptical as to whether the Republicans will support any additional election assistance, financial assistance at this point.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Rose, were you able to ask both of your questions?
I did get them both in just in case I ran out of time. So I asked them at the same time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Durbin, I hope that you will stay, and we're going to ask a few questions from Kim Foxx now. Kim, I wanted to first thank you for being here, and I was excited to vote for you in March. I'm going to vote for you again in November. We are each on our journey to figure out how is it that we can be good allies in this moment. I'm talking to my own kids right now. My 16-year-old is showing me clips from her studies about racism in America, including a 1915 film called Birth of a Nation, which basically shows the, it was a silent film. It is well studied right now for its cinematic whatever, but at the time, the president showed it at the White House to actually say this is fantastic, this is great. But if you have never seen it before, you will see racism right in the face on your screen. Basically, what the movie was saying was that Blacks should not have the right to vote, and if they do have the right to vote, they will disenfranchise white voters. The Ku Klux Klan is basically our heroes, and Black men should not be able to marry white women, and if they do pursue them, white women will jump off a cliff. This is the movie that they are studying in high school right now, and it horrifies me, but also, Kim, it gives me hope that you're looking history right in the face. We cannot ignore what's out there right now. So if you are ready for real change, we need to look back in history and see what we're actually founded on. So I just want to say that because I thank you for your work. This work is not easy. It's not simple. We need to be good allies, but we also need to promote policies that are not racist, policies that are anti-racist. So I also want to thank you for all the work that you're doing on bond and bail reform. I know these are things that seem really large, but I know that you can explain it to us in a way through the lens of, social justice. So I'm going to give you the mic now to kind of take it from here.
Thank you, Lenny. Yeah, I think it's really important that films like Birth of a Nation are explored, because that historical context is not lost on where we are now. The demonization of Black men, the fear that it was trying to evoke in their presence in community is some of the same things that we're talking about today. Some of the same issues when we see violence in policing or these horrific deaths that we've seen at the hand of law enforcement. And one of the things that is often said is, the officer was in fear of his life based on the actions of the person who was there. And when we're talking about unarmed people, whether it's Breonna Taylor, who's asleep in her bed in Louisville when the police come in, or George Floyd, who is compliant but is a large man, the argument will be, I felt threatened by them. And Birth of a Nation was, one of the earliest depictions of how the media would portray, Black men in this country, and kind of feeding into a continual stereotype that lead people to be fearful. And I think what we've seen in policing in particular, in these conversations that we're having, is that notion that African-American men pose a special threat. They are something to be feared, and our responses are sometimes required to be lethal. And so I'm really grateful to hear that your child is looking at that. The 13th is a great film, a documentary by Ava DuVernay that talks about the 13th Amendment and mass incarceration. And there's a segment in there that talks about Birth of a Nation. What I will say is, as it relates to bail reform and some of the other criminal justice initiatives, what we're trying to do is really be intentional in our policies to undo the harm that's already been caused. One of the things that, it was just a year ago today that Governor Pritzker signed the marijuana legalization bill here in Illinois. One of the biggest pieces for me with that legislation was the component that would allow for us to vacate the convictions of those who had previously been convicted for marijuana possession, going as far back as we could go. The reason we did that is because, again, from a standpoint related to race, African Americans in Cook County were 7 times more likely to be arrested and prosecuted for marijuana. Though every research document will tell you that African Americans, whites, Latinos, all use marijuana at the same rates. But so what we saw, because of the targeting of African Americans with the war on drugs, were large swaths of the community who were getting these convictions, which were barring them from employment, housing, student loans, and disenfranchising them further. So as we talk about policies that aren't just, race neutral, but are anti-racist, having a bill that now legalizes marijuana and also says, let's undo the harm that was caused. We have an affirmative responsibility to go back and fix the harm that were caused by these policies that we knew had a racist component to them. And that's the same thing that we're trying to do when we talk about bail reform. We know that the overrepresentation of people of color in our jails right now is not necessarily because of threats of dangerousness. And I want us to reject in our conversations and talking about bail that somehow we're talking about letting people who pose a threat to our communities out without any regard. What's happened is our bail system has been perverted into something that is essentially punishment before conviction. Jail is pretrial detention. It's still for people who are presumed innocent, and bail is to assure that they return to court, and so they don't flee, or that they're not a threat to public safety. And so what we were seeing was that there were people who had money, were charged with violent offenses or dangerous crimes, but could pay their way out. And then on the flip side, we saw a lot of people who were sitting in our jails who were there for non-violent offenses, but were too poor to pay even a nominal amount to get out. So that's what bail reform is about. It's about making sure that we're not using a system that was designed not to punish pre-trial, but to ensure someone's compliance, was not being used punitively for people of color. And by people of color, right now in our jail, 76% of the people in our jail in Cook County are African American, 76%. And even as we talk about violence in our communities, of those who are in our jail now, a good percentage of them are there for crimes of violence because we've worked to get those who don't belong there out. But we still see an overrepresentation of people who are there because they are homeless, people who are there because they have mental health issues or addiction issues and do not have the resources to get out. So if we address bail reform, address pretrial detention, I do believe that those policies are anti-racist because it is trying to unwind the perversions of those systems that have had a disproportionate impact on communities of color.
Thank you, Kim. Here in Chicago, we are looking to our own alderman right now to support a part of the consent decree requirement, which is to have for the the city listen to communities. And right now we're working to pass a civilian police oversight, civilian police accountability ordinance. And that's one thing that we are all working on. So call your alderman if you live in Chicago, and ask them if they support CPAC. It is one way to support one of the 10 demands of Black Lives Matter Chicago. We think about, Kim talked about the overcrowding of the jails right now, but we need to step back even further and think, how did they get there, especially if it did have to do with mental health issues. Right now, we believe, a lot of indivisibles and grassroots believe that the police force may be, we might need to not only just reform them, but actually transform how the system works right now. And we're very grateful for Senator Durbin and Kim Foxx for all of their work that they do, but we grassroots are demanding more in this moment in time. Right now, the world is watching Chicago, the third largest in the nation, and waiting, hoping, and working for transformative justice in Chicago, and hopefully, be a model for other cities across the nation. We're going to have closing statements from both Senator Durbin and Kim Foxx right now. I will give it to first Senator Durbin. Thank you for being here. We would love to hear just a few more words, and also if you wouldn't mind just letting us know how you're encouraging and recommending to others to wear their masks.
I have a mask here, but I'm sitting in my condo. I think I'm in a safe environment, but I do always wear a mask. I think it's a great idea. It really is just showing respect for the people around you, so that you should wear it, and I encourage it. But let me just say this. Kim Foxx and I will be on the ballot November 3rd, and I'm sure she will tell you that she just went through a bruising primary and came through with colors flying, and did so well. But she will tell you, and I will too, that at this moment in time, what we see out there in the environment of the state of Illinois, Cook County, and the election is like nothing we've ever seen before. We are politicians by nature, and it's built into our DNA to, like heat-seeking missiles, to seek out crowds of strangers and to approach them and introduce yourself, shaking hands in every direction. All of that is, considered absolutely unacceptable in the age of COVID-19. It just can't be done. In fact, unless you put your name on a mask, people may not even know you're in the same room with them. And that looks a little strange with your name on it. So it's an unusual campaign, and it's going to be a test of how we vote. We talked about voting by mail earlier, but it's also how we campaign, how we get the message across to everybody in terms of the issues that we are facing. And I think social media is going to be one of the major elements in this. And we've got to find the most effective way to deliver these messages to people so that they can learn what the real issues are going into the campaign. But thank you to Indivisible for who you are, what you are, and what you brought to the Illinois and American political scene.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. I'll remind you, and I'm just going to show real quick, that we are many from across the state, including Bloomington and Sauk Valley, and all over Chicago. And so we're very happy that you're here from the northwest suburbs. Thank you for being here. I want to say that, yes, we're definitely going to be using social media to elevate this idea to vote safely, securely, and have access to the ballot in any way possible. I'm going to pass it to Kim Foxx. Would love to hear the ways that you're convincing your friends and family to wear their masks out in public, and also any closing statements.
Yeah, I too am like Senator Durbin. I have masks everywhere. I have a box of masks in my car. I have a box of masks in my child's car. We don't go places anywhere without a mask. It is not only for my own protection, but as a good neighbor, wanting to make sure that I'm protecting others. I had a COVID-19 test a week ago to because I was around people. I'd been out, I'd been marching. and I came back negative, and I want to make sure that I'm protecting the people, not only that I love, but the people that I encounter at the grocery store, the people at the gas station, because that's our duty. And I think as we look at where we fare as Illinoisans compared to what the senator talked about earlier, there are places across this country right now that are being severely impacted by COVID-19. So wear your mask, wear them, wear them, wear them. I will just echo what the senator said, and I want to personally thank him for his advocacy for me throughout my campaign. We had an opportunity before they said you could not go places, to go places together and shake hands together. And I just could not be more honored to be on the ballot with him at this time in this election than I am right now. The advocacy that we're seeing in the streets that is allowed for, in the span of a month, the horrific death of George Floyd, to the fact that they are debating on the House floor right now, the George Floyd policing bill, the fact that in Louisiana they've banned no-knock warrants, the fact that we've seen real movement in such a short period of time is something to be encouraged by. But the biggest fish of them all is this election in November, both locally and nationally. If we want to continue the momentum that we are seeing, if we want to turn the actions in the street to long-term policy changes, we have to make sure we have the right people elected in November. President Trump is the obvious, and I think we should do everything possible to rid our country of the disease that is Donald Trump. But on the local level, we cannot take for granted the importance of making sure that Senator Durbin is back, and making sure that the values that we uphold in our criminal justice system are realized. One of the things I will say, William Barr, the Attorney General, who is finding himself under continued scrutiny for the unethical practices that he has done at the behest of this president, once referred to me as a social justice prosecutor. And, he thought he was insulting me. And in fact, I wear that as a badge of honor, particularly these days. If we want to undo the harmful policies of the past, we have to make sure that we elect proper people. And this is our time. As creative and innovative as the fact that we've got all these people together through phones and iPads and the like to be able to get messaging out, I think the message can go further and wider than going and touching one person at a time. So I'm grateful for Indivisible. I'm grateful for your advocacy, for your fearlessness, your relentlessness, and your holding the powerful accountable. And however I can be of assistance in these next few months to make sure that there's access to that ballot, I'm here and I stand with you in that regard.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to show everybody's face again. We've got folks from Springfield, from McLean County, from NWSA, OFA, Indivisible, and Palatine, and Arlington Heights, Shawnee, Carbondale, Printers Row,
Hey.
Chicago Heights, Metro East, and more. So thank you again for Sauk Valley, Western Front, Indivisible, and Forest Park, Indivisible, the 9th District. Thank you again, Kim Foxx. We're excited to work with you moving forward. And thank you again, Senator Dick Durbin. We invite you to come back again. We're going to have these every Thursday, so we need speakers. So, and there's still a lot to talk about. There was a lot that we touched on today, and we would love to dig in more. So thank you. You're welcome to stay. We're going to talk about Wisconsin, which is the most pivotal, we think, to win and to get this guy out of office, because we know we're here to hold the House, flip the Senate, and to fire Donald Trump. And with that, I wave and say thank you again. We're going to pass it now to Rose, who's Indivisible Illinois' 2020 coordinator. Rose.
Thank you again, Lenny. And yes, besides election security, the other most critical thing that we need to do is help our friends in Wisconsin win, because we know that Wisconsin is the key battleground state, and whomever wins in Wisconsin will win the presidency. I just shudder to think of Donald Trump and 4 more years. We were on the line with a group earlier today, and we feel that if Donald Trump by some way was able to retain the presidency, we would be done. So we are thrilled to have Heba Mohammed here with us. Just a few brief comments about her and the big task that she has ahead of her. And I hope everybody on this call will help her because she needs all of us to make this happen. So Heba's title is Distributed Organizing Director of the DPW, Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Her experience includes the Arab American Institute. She was a candidate for Green Bay Council. She was also part of AmeriCorps, so all very impressive. And she is now our key contact. A lot of people want to help in Wisconsin, so Heba has a very important role of organizing all of the out-of-state people like us. There's a lot of tremendous actions we can take. I have an Indivisible team myself, and I sent them to Heba just yesterday, and they were telling me how great she was and how great her meeting was, and they're on board. So please, everybody listening, let's help out Heba, and over to you. Mike's all yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rose, and thank you all for having me on again. It's a very generous introduction, so I really appreciate it. And also I just have to say, what a tough act to follow from both Kim Foxx and Senator Durbin. So I'm going to do my best here to continue with the motivational train. So I know last week my colleague Gabby joined you all to talk about our upcoming weekend of action. So the weekend is here now. This Saturday and Sunday, we are engaging in our first weekend of action for our bridge building phone calls. These are going to be phone calls that ultimately will help us expand our universe of Democratic voters that we can turn out in November to make sure that we are electing Democrats up and down the ticket. So this is a critical moment for our campaign, and this phase will really put us in a good place come November to make sure that as many Democrats as there are in Wisconsin are how many people are going to vote for Joe Biden and all the folks on the ticket. So if you are interested in joining us, we do have a sign up link. The website is www.wisdems.org/WOA. And I know that will be shared in the comments as well. So please feel free to click on that and sign up. We have shifts on both Saturday and Sunday. So this is, again, a critical time. We are fortunate to be able to spend this summer building up these lists and putting ourselves in a good place, and your help is going to be critical for that. A couple other things that I want to mention that I think are relevant. Part of this weekend of action is also a social media campaign. You may know that Mike Pence was in Wisconsin on Tuesday. Donald Trump is in Wisconsin today. They both held campaign style rallies. And Wisconsin is in the public eye for this reason. So we're encouraging our volunteers to use our social media toolkit, which is going to be available from that same link, to share why they're volunteering with the WisDems. We expect Wisconsin will be trending this week. Let's make it trend for the right reasons. So please share your excitement for the weekend of action. Ask your friends to come and join you as well. One of the things that we often hear from people who are really interested but just find themselves too busy is, call me after the summer is over and I'll make some phone calls in the fall as we get closer. That obviously is very helpful. We love to have as much help as possible, particularly as we get closer to the election. But the point I want to make is we expect this election to be a vote by mail election. Already 40% of Wisconsinites are planning to vote by mail, which means that rather than doing a traditional get out the vote in the weeks leading up to November 3rd, we are going to have to start our get out the vote effort early. And I'm talking like September early, because a lot of voters will already be deciding by late September how they're going to fill out their absentee ballots. And we need to reach them before those get submitted to make sure that they are voting for Democrats up and down the ballot. So your help now is going to be especially important, given that we have a sped up timeline and that we want to make sure all Wisconsinites are able to vote safely and don't have to risk their health to do so. So I'm happy to answer any questions. So thrilled to be here with you all again, and looking forward to everything that we're going to accomplish in the next 131 days.
Thanks, Heba. Rose, do you have any closing statements?
No, I think that we have all learned. I'll just be very brief. I do have a couple. I think we all learned the hard way in 2016 that we need to participate in our democracy. I know all of us on this call have been doing so, and we have just this much further to go. I just encourage you to sign up for HEBA's programs, and please help us work on vote by mail in Illinois. We want virus-free voting for Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, and the whole country. So let's keep it up. We're almost there and we can do it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Rose. I just have a few takeaways to leave you with. So right now, in this moment, inaction is not an option. COVID-19 is a pandemic within a pandemic for Black people. We're the racist systems in America that regularly fail Black people have become even less reliable. Systemic racism in our country leads to law enforcement criminalizing and killing Black people, just as it leads during the pandemic to Black people being infected by COVID-19 at devastating rates and bearing a greater burden of the pandemic's economic fallout. Black people and allies are rising up against the systems that take away not only Black lives, but also Black people's access to housing, employment, good health, and full freedom. And we have what may be a once-in-a-generation chance as a country to roll back white supremacy and restructure our political and economic systems to ensure Black liberation and a country where everyone enjoys equality, liberation, opportunity, safety, and joy. I want to thank everyone for joining the call today, everyone here on the Zoom call, everyone there in Facebook Live. We welcome you to join your local Indivisible group. If you don't know who that is, go to indivisible.org and just put in your zip code and find your Indivisible group there. I welcome any questions or any comments to this agenda. As we say every Thursday at this time, we're going to have a virus-free voting live stream update. And we just welcome you into this movement. And no matter if it's your first time doing anything in this electoral cycle, or if it's the 20th time that you've campaigned, or if you've only marched once at the Women's March and haven't done anything since, we invite everybody to join in any capacity that you can. I'm going to show all of our speakers again so that we could wave goodbye. Thank you, Hiba. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody from across the state who has joined us here. And we will see you next time.